Welcome to Barbara's Bookstore. Thank you for joining us for this evening's event. We are excited to bring you Fred Guttenberg, author of Find the Helpers. Tonight, Fred is hosted by Jesse Rogers, an MLB insider. Go for it, Jesse.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm very honored to be hosting this night. Thanks to Barbara's Bookstore and, of course, Fred's new book, Find the Helpers, which I've read a couple times now. I actually got away on vacation, Fred, and with my mask as a book holder, placeholder, was able to read this a couple times. It's such a wonderful book, and we're so glad people have joined us for this book launch. Thanks again to Barbara's Bookstore. And at the bottom, you can get your copy for 10% off if you click on the link there at the bottom of our screen. But we'll get to that in a little bit. It's my honor to first and foremost introduce Fred Guttenberg, the author of Find the Helpers. And I think a lot of people know your story, Fred, and your journey. But real quick, and we'll get into some background. I mean, writing this book had to be both cathartic, emotional, probably a few other adjectives to go along with that. But I'll let you describe what it meant to write this book.
You just actually used the two words that I would use. I was never what I would call a writer before this happened. And when we were planning Jamie's funeral, the funeral director handed me a journal and said, I want you to use this. Just start writing your thoughts, writing about your day. And I said, I've never done that before. He goes, just trust me. He goes, you're going to want to do this now. And it's amazing to me to think that he did that. And I really do. I think of the people at the funeral home as helpers along my journey. But his saying that to me got me to start writing about my day. And social media also became a platform for me to write, especially Twitter, where I really learned how to write very impactful, short messages about what was happening in my life. So writing became important to me. It was my way of getting things off my chest. It was my way of getting through my day. And a few months after Jamie was killed, I said to my wife, I want to write a book. I want to write our story. Writing this book was very cathartic for me. Telling my story and getting it off my chest helped me in really meaningful ways. But it also, and you read the book, there were parts of this book that were terribly emotional for me, where I had to go through events again to write them. And that was difficult. It was exhausting. But I want people to know my story. I want people to know how I went through some of the worst things you could go through possibly, and then I got through it, and then I'm able to move forward, and how. So writing this book, telling my story, but ultimately telling the stories of all these other people, I would say in a weird way saved me.
Oh, it's wonderful. And, here's the beautiful thing about Fred for people joining in. Fred is willing to talk about anything and write, and he's written about the most tragic moments of his life, several of them. His brother died as a result of 9/11, having gone in there as a first responder, and then obviously what happened with your daughter. So later on, we will take questions for those of you, and there really is no question that's off limits. So there's that ask a question link at the bottom there, bottom right. You'll be able to line them up now, as a matter of fact. Let's backtrack for people that don't know me very well. I work over at ESPN Chicago. I've been there a decade, and our connection's kind of interesting. Anthony Rizzo, everybody knows Anthony Rizzo that's watching, first baseman for the Cubs. He went to Stoneman Douglas High School years before, obviously, the tragic shooting. And not only is there a connection there, but Anthony Rizzo's agent, who I know very well, Mark Pollock, is Fred's cousin. Sure so that is the connection. And again, very honored that you asked me to host this, but I know that you're actually looking forward to talking a little sports, in the sense that sports was a helper for you and continues to be. And we've seen this throughout the summer with the social injustice. Sports can be a driver for change for good.
Yeah.
And I know you probably want to talk about your Dolphins and your Florida Panthers. Fred's in Florida, but maybe we'll start there. You find the helpers. You found them in sports teams and people that work for them.
Well, I did, my family did, and the other families did. And, and I'm glad we're starting there, because most people know me and my political work, we'll call it that. And, but the sports world has meant so much to me. I'll start with Anthony. Anthony is what I would now call a Chicago icon, but he and his family are friends of ours. And through my cousin, Anthony's watched my children grow up. Anthony knew my daughter. When my daughter died, Anthony's family, and that included Anthony fairly short order after, they were at my house that whole week. It was unbelievable to see Anthony's parents. I mean, they were whatever we needed. Got to get food in the house, they were doing it. You would need us to clean the kitchen. You'd want us to take out the garbage. You want us just to make sure we're there. Noticing who's going in, who's going out, whatever we needed. Just helping my family. And because that's who they are. Anthony's this great baseball player, but he's also this guy with this massive, huge heart. Maybe because of what he's gone through. I think most people who know his story know of his medical issues with cancer. And what they may not know is the work he does to help others with cancer, especially children, and the amount of money he works day in and day out to raise for others, and again, mainly kids with cancer, because he's this guy with this big heart, just a really great guy. And his support of my family and his family's support of my family, they are people who I would count as my helpers. But, then there's the sports teams. There's my Florida Panthers. And I am a monster Panthers fan. My son plays ice hockey, played for the Stoneman Douglas hockey team. To say the hockey community wrapped their arms around my family would be an understatement. That they wrap their arms around our community would be an understatement. When the Stoneman Douglas team miraculously, after February 14th, went on to win these championship games and went to the national championship games, the Florida Panthers stepped up, provided the team plane, made a donation to make sure there was going to be no cost required. They brought the Stanley Cup to the arena for the kids to actually skate around with, just as a healing effort. But they also had these nights commemorating the 17 families. They raised money for the families. There is now a permanent memorial in the Florida Panthers building for those who were lost. Really, over and beyond. The Miami Heat, there were a couple of kids amongst the 17 who were very into basketball, and the Miami Heat really stepped up in support of those families and, again, our community. And the Dolphins did the same thing. It was just, the Miami Marlins. In fact, Anthony was at the game. I think it may have been the opening game of the year. I can't remember. But
I was there. It was the opening night. We happened to go back to Miami for opening night.
Yeah.
Which was amazing.
So they brought all the families there. Actually, it was an invitation to the community. And my son is the one who threw out the pitch to Anthony. So every which way sports could have helped to lift the spirits of people, of the community, of my family, they were there to do it. And it's so important that you asked me this and that I have a chance to talk about it, because when I talk about find the helpers, sometimes, and I talk about it sometimes being in unexpected places, I would call a lot of what happened unexpected, but our helpers, that's who they are. And I think I've had the good fortune of just experiencing the love of so many people, but yet look around our country. These are the kinds of things these teams and players do all the time for people in need. They're doing it now through COVID. They've done it through other tragedies. And I consider myself very fortunate to have been a part of that and their love.
And actually, you have more nice things to say about politicians in this book than I thought. But what I wanted to say was, not always can politicians step up the way we all want, but professional athletes, other people of means can and have. Bradley Whitford, the actor, wrote the forward to this wonderful book. So where you can't always rely on the politicians because there's politics involved, you can rely sometimes on other people. And I was at spring training the day of the shooting, Valentine's Day 18, and Anthony Rizzo had only been there a few days, and he immediately flew down there and obviously connected with the school and spoke and was with your family. And then again, we returned in what was it, late March, early April for opening night. So I can see how that connection, was important to you and continues to be. And we see it again, school shootings, racial, social injustice, sports teams can have a say. The guy I work with, Theo Epstein, who just, stepped down from his position with the Cubs. Why? In part, he wants to work in community service because he sees what a difference you can make as a celebrity or as an athlete or as someone of means.
Listen, and I was in Chicago 2 summers ago, and Anthony introduced me to Theo in person, and Theo is a really unique guy who cares deeply about the communities around him and what's happening in the world. And here he is, this person running this Chicago Cubs sports program. And in fact, it was the year, I think it might have been the year after the World Series, maybe it was 2 years after, that he was a part of building. And he wanted to talk to me, not about any of that, but how he could help me in the world of gun violence.
Yeah.
What could he do to be a part of that? Because as I tell people all the time, we may look out in the world and see big time athletes or big time entertainers or big time politicians. But the truth is, at the end of the day, we're all just human beings with hearts and families we love and people we want to help. And, I think we would be well served by understanding the goodness that exists in everybody and being open to receiving it.
Fred, I want to read one paragraph from your book, and of course you can purchase it 10% off if you use the code event. Look at your screen bottom right there. You'll see the event code right there. But this is early on. This is page 26. The introduction on a Day of Love is the chapter, or the name of the introductory chapter here. I just want to read this one paragraph. And when we talked about doing this, you mentioned the book isn't overly political. It's about finding your helpers. But I think this paragraph sums it up. It starts a little political, but which is okay. But then it goes to the essence of it all. So I want to read this to everybody. My personal mission is to break the gun lobby. My goal for the rest of my life is to help elect every government official who supports gun safety laws and to campaign against anyone who doesn't. But I have a separate mission for this book. To fight, you have to have hope. And this book is about nourishing the soul so that you have the stamina to fight. This book is meant to be a beacon of love and hope and compassion. Combined with my advocacy, my hope is that it will finally shift an immovable object. And I mean, that paragraph really is beautifully written and sums up the essence of the book. Yes, there's political activism within this book, but it is about hope and getting help during times of grief, and then getting help to activate the activism, so to speak. And boy, you've had a lot of help. And now I'll say something nice about politicians, starting with our president-elect. You have a nice connection with him well before he was president-elect. And I know you're hoping that he can take things to another level here.
Listen, in every facet of life, whether it's politics, sports, anywhere else, there's bad people, right? We all know that. But just because there's bad people doesn't mean they're all bad. The same is true in politics. And the truth is, I've met some really amazing people in the world of politics who are committed to doing good, who want to do the right thing. And one of the people who I've gotten to know is the president-elect Joe Biden. He reached out to me about 10 days after Jamie was murdered. He wasn't running for anything at the time. Really what he was trying to do was support his son Beau Biden's foundation. And it was funny. The way he reached out to me is he called me. And I was not answering phone calls at the time if I didn't recognize your number.
Sure.
So he left a message where he said, you're probably not picking up the phone, which I understand, but this is Joe Biden, and I will be calling you back at, I think it was 6 o'clock, at exactly 6 o'clock. If you want to speak to me, pick up the phone. If not, I do understand. I mean, just totally like the unbelievable way of putting it. And of course, when I heard that, I picked up the phone when he called back. And we spent, I would say, 40, 45 minutes on the phone. He wanted to know about my daughter. That's her behind me. About my son, about my wife, and yes, about me as well. He wanted to talk to me about his family and what they've gone through and how they've gotten through it. And by the end of the call, what he really wanted to know was what my plan was. And I told him I want to break the effing gun lobby. That led to a discussion of what he called mission and purpose, which has really formed the foundation of what I do. At the end of the call, he invited me to an event that he was going to be doing in Florida a few weeks later. And he asked me to bring one of the other Parkland parents. When we got there, there were like 250, 300 people there waiting to hear him speak. He gets there, he's shaking a lot of hands, and eventually he has his aide bring us to a private room, which I figured we were going to be in for 2 minutes. You know, he's got hundreds of people waiting to hear him speak. And we get into this private room. He sits us down. And about 20 minutes into that conversation, I said to him, I said, you have hundreds of people waiting to hear you speak. Don't you need to go? And he just said, this is more important. Because that's who he is. This decent, empathetic, caring person. And what blew me away in that conversation is the time he took to speak to us and why he wouldn't leave us until he did about our families and how we all grieve differently and how because of that, many families fall apart after an event like this. And he didn't want that to happen to us. So he wanted us to know this and to have a plan on how to deal with it. This is a person who cares about nothing more than helping those that he can. He's got decency in his heart. He's empathetic. And at a time where this country needs an empathetic president, there cannot be a better choice.
You know, I remember one thing Anthony Rizzo said when he returned from being down there, and you know the media was all around him because this was a national story. And you know, Anthony Rizzo is no politician, right? He's a baseball player. He was 28 years old at the time. He hasn't seen he hasn't seen the life's experiences like you and I have. You a little bit more than me, age-wise. But the thing he said, the two words that we don't hear often enough, he used the words, why can't we just use common sense? And I feel like you felt that as well in the aftermath. Common sense, but here's my point. It didn't feel like common sense was universally accepted, right? And so now you had to really step up your game, so to speak, if you're using an athlete's analogy. I don't know what else to say, but you know, making some scenes at the State of the Union, at Brett Kavanaugh's hearings. You You made a point of standing when talking to politicians. You wouldn't sit down. I feel like you had to do things to get your voice, make your voice heard. And I wonder if that you felt like you were on an island at times doing that, but then you get the backing of people like Nancy Pelosi or Ted Deutsch, your congressman down there, or Joe Biden. Is that how it felt? Like sometimes you felt very alone, but other times, you had the backing.
Well, first things first, Anthony. Listen, he is very perceptive, because to me, the outcome that I want is pure common sense. The only thing that interferes with the common sense approaches to doing something about gun violence is politics and people who make money off of it. But to fix it is really common sense. There's nothing about it that wouldn't be classified that way. Now, going on to the other part of what you said, of the examples you used, the only thing that I did that was actually very intentional and was about me not wanting people to feel comfortable talking to me about what happened to my daughter was when I stood. The reaction to gun violence, in my mind, was always way too temporary, way too short, way too polite, and way too comfortable. And I didn't want to make people comfortable. My daughter just got murdered. So I would stand everywhere I went. And what you need to know is when you go to the Hill, Capitol Hill, and you go meet with senators and congressmen, they all have these very comfortable rooms with couches and coffee tables. And when you want to go, when they meet with constituents, you all sit around there, everybody gets comfortable and everybody's happy.
Right.
I didn't want to make people comfortable. So I stood and I would tell the senators and the congressmen, you're free to sit down or you can stand with me. And most of them chose to stand with me. There were some who chose to sit down. With regards to the Kavanaugh handshake and the State of the Union, those were not intentional moments. Those were the State of the Union was an emotional reaction. I lost it. The Kavanaugh handshake, actually, I would say that was intentional. I was there as an invited guest of Senator Feinstein. And as they were breaking for lunch, I went to talk to the senators. That, I don't know if you watch the hearings, but they were all in like an oval or semi-circle, I should say. And specifically, Senator Blumenthal, who I've developed a nice rapport with, I went to say hello to him. We were talking. As he's getting up to go to lunch, I turn around and there's Brett Kavanaugh 3-4 feet from me. So I walk those few steps, I put out my hand, and I simply said, hi, my name is Fred Guttenberg, father of Jaime Guttenberg, who was murdered in Parkland, Florida. Which, just so you know, the reason why I can say it verbatim, it is the exact words I use to introduce myself to every single person who I meet when I'm going to talk about it. Because I don't want to wait. I want you to know straight up front, I have no agenda but this. This is who I am. This is what I'm here for. So that's what I said to him. As soon as I got to the murdered in Florida part, he did that turn that we all saw. And Don McGahn, who works for the White House, and a security guy, they immediately got up and they just went with him real fast. I didn't think much of it. I just figured, wow, what a jerk, I guess he didn't care. And unfortunate because he had this beautiful family of his that were there at the hearings that he introduced. And, his family, any other family, it's an American story, could become victims of gun violence too. And I wanted him to be aware of that. So he does this beeline, he turns. I figured, what a jerk. I'm going to lunch. It's over with. I literally get maybe halfway down the hallway in the Senate, my phone starts buzzing. Oh my God, what happened? Because I guess the AP photographer got a picture of it and it went viral. And it was like before I could get to a sandwich, it was blowing up all over the news. So it was crazy. I got back from lunch. And long story short, for those who haven't yet read the book, I ended up being temporarily removed from the room. and interrogated. Eventually, I got to go back in. What's crazy about Kavanaugh, while it was just an attempt at a handshake, that's all it was, that he messed up. As people will read about in the book, he actually lied about it under oath later on. So, because after the hearings, these candidates for the Supreme Court, before they're confirmed, they have to answer written questions that come to them. They're still under oath. And so their answers are under oath. And he was asked about it. And he said, had I known that was a Parkland parent, I would have shook his hand, wished him condolences. I only wished I would have had the chance to do so after that. I was there for 3 days. And he knew it. And he knew it. And even Lindsey Graham, the next on day 2, asked him about it, and he blew it off. So he lied about it under oath, but it doesn't matter. He still got proof of the Supreme Court, and now we need to live with him.
All these stories in the book, amazing. You can get 10% off Find the Helpers. Use the code event at the bottom right of the screen here. We're going to take some questions in a little bit. We're just flying by. We're almost halfway through. So if you want to line up some questions, just go into the box there, ask a question, and we'll get to it in the second half hour. Now, Fred, I know you've done a bunch of these, and we're halfway through. And the fact that you're willing to talk about anything, I'd be remiss if I didn't just simply ask about your daughter. Tell us about Jamie. What was special about her? I know it's difficult, but I think it's important to put, faces and names and people to this cause that you've undertaken.
No, I appreciate that. Like I said, that's actually an actual picture. My daughter was a competitive dancer, and in one of her routines, she had what he known as this flying leap. And a photographer caught the photo, her competition, and when she was murdered, this photo just went viral. And an artist eventually did that off of the photo. But my daughter was this beautiful, amazing, competitive dancer. And what really, though, made me so proud to be her dad is her strength in everything she did, whether it was dancing, whether it was in her ability to stand up to bullies. She was this petite little kid. That's what she was not a big girl. But when she saw people being bullied, she put herself in the middle of it. She hated watching bullies bully somebody. And she wouldn't listen to her dad when her dad would try to explain to her that I was now worried about her safety because she was putting herself in front of bullies that were sometimes bigger than her. And I was worried she was going to get hurt. And to give you an idea of her strength, I think she was in 6th grade at the time. She came home and she told us a story about being about somebody bullying somebody else and how she got herself in the middle of it to make it stop. And she told me how big the person was. I said, you can't do that anymore. I said, if you see somebody being bullied, you need to get an adult. And she just said to me, she was, Dad, you've always underestimated me because of my size. And I said, oh, so you think you're tough? And she said, yeah. So I pushed her and she pushed me back. And I pushed her again and she pushed me back again. The third time I pushed her, I got what became known as the kangaroo kick in my house because my daughter had these fierce, fast dancer's legs. And what I learned in that moment is she doesn't play, when she's done, she's done. When I collected myself, I just put my hand on her shoulder. I said, if anybody ever pushes you around again, that's what you do. And it was over with. But my daughter, she did. She fought for kids who other kids would bully. She volunteered her time for kids with special needs. It was her dream to become a pediatric physical therapist for kids with special needs. She just had this amazingly clear head on her shoulders of who she was, what she wanted to do. At her funeral, I described her as the energy in the room. And she was, because it didn't matter if you were in my house or at the dance studio or in school. You were either laughing because of her or yelling because of her. You were always responding to her. She was just that kind of a person. Yeah, my house is a much quieter place. And what I would do, because she loved to laugh, to hear her laughter one more time.
Yeah, I'm sure. What I'm happy about is we still remember her name. We know your name from the activism. I, for a moment, was going to Google the shooter's name, and then I didn't do it. I don't think anybody remembers the shooter's name, nor should they. But they remember your name because of what you've done, and certainly your daughter's name because of the stories you tell about her, which you just did. And a lot of that is in the book.
My mission is to make sure nobody ever forgets
who
my daughter is.
Yeah, that chapter about her is just quite moving, and I hope people get a chance. Louisa writes that she just picked up a book. We appreciate that, Louisa.
Thank you.
And anybody that wants to ask a question in this second half hour, feel free to write it in the question box there. And thanks to Barbara's Bookstore, of course, for hosting us. Last I talked to Barbara's, the actual store was open. Like you could go in there, but I don't know what the situation is these days, but virtually you can still buy books and get it that way.
Listen, in this strange world of COVID that we find ourselves in, I believe they are open, but they do have the books and they're also able to take the orders online.
Yeah.
What I've also done, and I'll show you a photo, I sent them, these are our book plates. They're basically stickers that go in the book, and I sent them a bunch of signed ones. So anyone who gets the book will have a signed book. You know, and I hope people do, because especially what we're going through now in these times of COVID. I mean, today we surpassed 253,000 Americans who have died. Mm-hmm. And I want people to know, while we're going through this, that we are going through this together. And I hope if they read my book, that they do understand that no matter what we go through in life, we do have a path forward. You know, my rabbi at Jamie's funeral said, we don't move on, we move forward. And this book, I write how I did that. And I hope people take it to heart, because I can tell you with certainty, I didn't do it alone. I did it with amazing others, whether they were from my community, from the circle of friends and family that I had before this, or who have come from the circle of friends that I've developed since this. But you don't do it alone. And I hope people read the book, and from this point forward, always stay aware of who their people are, who their helpers are, who their circle is. And if you're not sure, go to a place of worship, go to a community center, because there's always amazing others out there that just simply want to do nothing but help people in need. I also hope people who read this book come away from it feeling, you know what? When I'm in a position where I can be, where things are okay for me, I always need to be a helper to someone else who needs it. So I hope people do go out and read the book, because it is not a book about just, you know, what happened. This is a book about hope. It is a book of how I got to go forward. It is a book that I get to talk to kids in directly, and our future, what I call our future heroes and leaders, about how to go forward from moments in life, some that are worse than others. And so, yeah, I'm really honored that I get to do events like this and talk about the book. And I hope people, after they've had a chance to read it, will hopefully reach out to me and share their thoughts So appreciate that.
I want to talk about your activism as well and where it is right now.
Sure.
Trying not to be too political, but obviously the president-elect has been in your corner. I want to get your thoughts on where it might go once he takes over. And obviously, if you read the book, the outgoing president may have ignited your activism. You say he politicized your daughter's death on the day of her funeral, correct?
Correct.
And brought up Russian collusion in the same tweet about the shooting, and I know that really activated you.
The morning that I buried Jamie, he tweeted about the Parkland murder, and he blamed it on the Russia investigation. And he said, in essence, that had the FBI been doing their job and not focused on the Russia investigation, the Parkland shooting would not have happened. So he politicized my daughter to try and make himself look good. And it infuriated me because my daughter's murder had nothing to do with the Russia investigation. There was an FBI failure, don't get me wrong, but it was a low-level call center failure. It had nothing to do with him. And so for him to make it about him on the day that I'm burying my daughter really put me in a place where nothing he said after that would have the same kind of impact for me. However, after I read the tweet, I was infuriated and I started just kind of pacing around my house. My wife tried to get me to calm down. And kind of going back to the way this conversation started, what helps me sometimes to get through things is to write. And so literally an hour before we left our house for the funeral, I started rewriting the ending of my eulogy to address this tweet because it was the only thing I knew to do. I had to write. And so at the end of the eulogy, I delivered a response to the president in that tweet. And I told him he has no permission to bring my daughter's murder into the Russia investigation. However, he has my permission to join me in an effort to do something about gun violence. Unfortunately, he chose not to do that. And unfortunately, he chose to politicize the issue of gun violence, while too many people across this country have continued to die every day because of it. I cannot wait until we transition to President Biden.
Tell me what you think can happen for your cause moving forward.
Listen, I think
not your cause, our cause.
No, it's an American cause. 40,000 plus people a year are dying of gun violence right now. And it's going to get worse because during the pandemic, through a variety of ways, there was a gun surge unleashed across this country. And, when you take guns and first-time gun owners and you combine that with economic insecurity and job losses and other things, it's going to raise the gun violence death rate, not lower it. So we need to take common sense steps to start lowering the gun violence death rate, whether it be with regards to background checks, not just on weapons, but on ammunition. Whether it is with regard to the age of who can purchase, banning high capacity magazines. I personally think we should be banning assault weapons. As a country, we need to treat gun violence as a public health issue. It is. So we need to give physicians and hospitals and doctors' offices the ability to talk to families about weapons, and if you have weapons in your home, what you should be doing to keep those in your home safe. Things like safe storage. There's so many common sense things we can do. In Florida, after Jamie was killed, we passed what we call in Florida red flag laws. Many states call them extreme risk protection orders, which give law enforcement the ability through a judge to remove weapons from someone who's deemed or a threat themselves or someone else, and puts in place protocols to ensure that all judicial rights are followed. There's so much that can be done that won't infringe on anybody's rights to ownership, anybody's Second Amendment rights, if you're a legal, lawful gun owner, but that will save lives. And, the idea that we don't do it is catastrophic. What I also believe is with this new administration, listen, you see a lot of states taking steps to address gun violence. You see a lot of cities taking steps to address gun violence. But you're only as safe as the city next to you or the state next to you. And so having a national plan for this will be good for everybody.
Sounds like COVID as well. You're only as safe as your next door neighbor. Or
the politics of COVID and the politics of gun violence are exactly the same.
How much would you say percentage wise you've been able to move the ball since Jaime's death? Have you gotten 10% of what you want done? Is it more than that? Is it less than that?
So it's a really interesting question. On a local level, in many instances, we've been very successful. There are many states that have passed some really significant laws to deal with this. The problem is it has not moved on a national level. And it has, listen, gun safety measures have passed through the House, but they basically hit a roadblock in the Senate. And without going through the Senate, it doesn't go anywhere else. So we've really been limited on a national level. And until we address this on a national level, we're not going to really lower the gun violence death rate. We have to tackle this in a much bigger way, and I know that's coming. We're going to do that.
I want to allow people to ask some questions. I know there's some viewers out there that have many thoughts on this. So if you have one, bottom right corner, just type in your question. I'll go ahead and read the first one here. Thank you so much for writing this book. Is this the first of many? And will you run for office, Fred? I'm sure you've been asked that often.
Well, so I'll answer the first part of that question. Is this the first of many books? I have a feeling I will write another one. I have some ideas for things that have become important to me that I would like to write about. I enjoy writing. I really do. So it is not impossible to think that I will do this again. As for office, I do not plan to run for office. I have found myself being very comfortable in a role of saying what I think, when I think it, how I think it, and not worrying about the politics of it or sanitizing it, not worrying about, am I being too rough with people on Twitter? Will that come back to hurt me down the road? Right. I don't want to worry about those things. Right. I have to be me. I am a father of 2 kids, fighting to make this country safer. That's who I am. That's what I want to do. I don't want to fundraise. I don't want to do anything other than that. And part of that, by the way, is the electoral process, because by hopefully delivering more decency and civility to our politics, we make the world a better place and a safer place.
It's a good follow-up to the running for office question. If President-elect Biden asked you to sit on a committee, would you consider that, where you'd have a voice, but you're not beholden to the typical political BS?
Absolutely. I am definitely intending to have a role on this topic going forward. So the answer is if asked, I absolutely will.
I want to go back to politicians that helped you, because we make fun of them, but we're trying not to. And there have been many that have, and maybe not just politicians, even some of the other celebrities you met, who has surprised you, whether it be with their kindness, with anything, with their actions, if they are politicians. Who has surprised you? Well, I didn't know that person had that in them or was like that. These are people you've never met before, and all of a sudden you're in this world.
Yeah, listen, I'll give you 2 political examples. and then maybe an entertainment example. But political examples, one would be Ohio Governor John Kasich, who I was invited to Ohio to testify actually on red flag laws. And the day that I spent there, I met with him for a private meeting, and then I met with his administration. What was really interesting is I didn't really expect that he and I would have much of a connection. Politically, we weren't the same, but I developed a real connection for him. He took the time to sit with me and just have a really deep conversation about what I was going through, about faith, about encouraging me to continue with my faith because I was in a pretty bad place with it. And it was a very, really from the heart, meaningful conversation that went on for a very long time. What really also amazed me about him is when I was flying home, I landed and my wife said, "You're never going to guess who called me." And I said, "Who?" And it was John Kasich, who then took the time to call my wife that night. And my wife is not political. This isn't her world.
Yeah.
But he wanted to just check in with her also. And I just thought it was amazing that he took those steps. Listen, we're not a family that could vote for him. He did it because he's a good person. The other person from the Democratic Party, another governor, was Phil Murphy from New Jersey. Mm-hmm. Person who I can never vote for. We had a mutual connection, and within a week or two after Jamie's murder, he called me with his wife, and we spoke for quite some time. And eventually, and he told me that because of what happened, he was going to make doing something about gun violence in New Jersey a key issue for him, and he kept his word. In fact, not long after that, he was inviting me to New Jersey to meet with his team on what could be done, and ultimately back to New Jersey for a press conference where we were going to lay out what he intended to do. He also has stayed in touch with us. He calls, he texts just to make sure we're okay. We can never vote for him, but he's just a good, decent person. And I'm really thankful because while you'll always hear politicians that, these are just examples of what I've learned where many of them are just like us. They have big hearts. They have families they care about, and they're decent. There's people like Ted Deutsch and Eric Swalwell, who I count amongst my friends now because, I've just developed such a connection to the two of them. In the world of entertainment, I have the good fortune of having become, my friends with Alyssa Milano through all of this. And she's just a person who, if she could wrap her arms around everybody and make everybody feel better all at once, she would, because that's who she is. Her activism, her strength in her activism, the way she tackles tough issues without concern for what people might say about her, has inspired me. To some extent, has shown me the way. Right. And so, when she reached out early on and then has maintained that relationship, it just blew me away because honestly, these are all people who have lives filled with lots of other people, and that they made time for me mattered a lot, and that they continue to do so just shows you how decent they are.
Those are great stories. We have several more questions for Fred. We've got about 10 minutes left in our discussion here. Fred, thanks for writing this book. This is from Philip. It is inspiring, and your points about finding helpers is absolutely correct. Who would you say has inspired you? Who has been your most inspired helper?
So I'll tell you in two ways. um, the answer to that. The person who's given me the advice that honestly has been more helpful to me than any other person was Joe Biden. What he said to me, and it was when he spoke to me about how we all grieve differently, and he talked to me about 92% of marriages falling apart after this, and not wanting me to be in that statistic, and actually talking to me about how to make sure that doesn't happen. Nobody else ever even used the concept with me of we all grieve differently. But it was the most important thing that I needed to hear, because my wife and I are going through this differently. My son and I are going through this differently. They've been very private. I've been very public. I have been very out there while they don't want that. So we had to figure out ways to make that work. And knowing that this is not something that I have to be afraid of, we just need to have a plan amongst us, came directly from Joe Biden. It's been the most important thing for me to manage what I do while also making sure I take care of those I love. The other person who helped me in such a deep way, but I don't know him. But the truth is, really important. When I was at my lowest moments, I used to get in my car by myself and put on my Billy Joel music. Now, I grew up on Billy Joel. Billy Joel's been with me through every phase of my life. Having that outlet to clear my head with something that just always worked for me got me through some of the worst days in my life. I'm going to give you one more. I have a group of a couple of guy friends that, especially in the early weeks, they held me up.
Yeah.
They carried me. There's the one who's the law enforcement officer who went back to the school and ended up identifying my daughter. There is my other friend who did not leave my side. When we were planning the funeral, he stayed out of the room. So my wife and I had privacy, but he stayed close enough to listen to everything so that I wouldn't have to worry about anything. He had it all down for me. There are just people in your life who know you better than anyone. And these guys do. They carried me at a time when I could have fallen apart in any second.
So it's so interesting because normally we rely on family, but family's going through everything you're going through. You do need friends. You do need friends from the outside to pick you up, because you can't always rely on the family who's going through the same thing.
My family and I, we were broken.
Yeah.
We were broken. And so I am so thankful that I had the people in my life that I did, and that I met the people who came into my life. I think about my direct community, Parkland, and the people who I got to know because of what happened that day, who stepped up for my family and the other families, whatever any of our families needed, I've made new amazing friends out of my community who I never knew before February 14th because of what happened, and because they just stepped up for our community and for our families in such meaningful ways. And again, it gets to what I always say. We all have our helpers. We just have to be open enough to letting them in.
Last couple of minutes here with Fred. Actually, would a question: How is your wife and son doing? How are your wife and son doing?
I'm glad you asked that. My son is doing okay. Thankfully, he's had this amazing network of friends who, from the second this started, they've had their arms wrapped around him. And, he's growing up now. He actually just turned 20. And he's got a really good life plan for himself. It was a struggle early on. He always had that sibling with him. And the idea of being an only child broke him up pretty good for a while. Yeah. But he's doing okay. My wife, she's doing okay. I tell people all the time, we both lost our kid, but she also lost her way of life. Jamie, whether it was with dance or whatever, I was always, going off and doing with my son, hockey with my son. Right. We're both car nuts, so I was always doing with him. She was always doing with Jamie. And so it's been for her, not having her daughter around, and this has been really just tough. But knock on wood, she's doing okay. And together, we're going to keep doing okay and keep doing better every single day.
Of course, you can. She's in the book. She's in the book. What was it? The 1 year anniversary. She wrote an. Would you call it an op-ed?
Well, she did. It was an op-ed that is in the book talking about her remembrance of that day.
Yeah.
But she's also in the book at the end. While she's been very private, she wanted to let people know her story and how she's not, while she's private, she's not absent. And so she actually wrote for the book. We have a foreword written by Bradley Whitford. My wife wrote the afterword.
Right.
And to really tie up the book and how we're doing as a family and what she wants people to know, which is how to go get support and get help if you need it.
Find the helpers. You can get 10% off if you click the link at the bottom of our screen. I want to thank Barbara's Bookstore for hosting us, Fred. That hour went fast. I know you've done many of these. You've had to talk about the most tragic, intimate moments of your life, and I can't say enough about what you've done to move this cause forward and to help other people. I think of all the tragedies, Sandy Hook, Columbine, and I'm not sure there was a parent who's done more and put himself out there more than you have. And this book, again, isn't about politics. There's politics in there, but it's about finding the help in tragedy. And you certainly summarized in this book very well.
Well, listen, Jesse, I truly appreciate you and this hour and your commitment to some people who I care about a lot. And next time I'm in Chicago, I'd love to come sit down and be with you in person.
Absolutely. And thanks for tuning in, listening, watching us today. Hope you enjoyed the hour conversation with Fred, and make sure you pick up his book, Find the Helpers, available at Barbara's Bookstore online. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.